Welcome to Nick Eats Food. This week on Nick Eats Food, it's not like a solid food like I've done. I've done cheese and pepper and an onion. It's the cinnamon challenge. I have a bowl here in case I'm gonna die. I don't have water, and I might have to get up. Don't do this at home. I'm an adult. I have life experience, and you don't. I'm trying not to get too much because I don't want to. That's a good chunk of cinnamon. You see that? Okay. All right. Well, here goes. I'm gonna. I don't have water, and I made a mistake. It's so dry. Oh, I get some water. I can't leave. I gotta spit it out. I can do it. It's just like solid cinnamon in my mouth. There's so much. There's so much cinnamon in my mouth. There's so much cinnamon. I keep saying it because it's true. Okay. I'm alive. I'm alive. It's all that matters. This has been Nick Eats Food. Well, condiments. Not condiments. Flavors. There's a flavor. Cinnamon's a flavor. I've been eating food and I'm Nick. Bye. Jeez.
Wow, Nick, you really put it all out on the line on that one. Well done. I applaud you. I'm glad you made it. Nick is still alive. Can confirm. Seen him today. So, well done, Nick. Hey, now we're going to be in a time of teaching. So we're going to be in 1 Peter 2, 13 through 25. Hopefully you guys have already had a chance to read it as a group. And we're going to just look at it a little bit here before we have some small group time. So what I want to ask you to begin with is, have you ever had a moment where a teacher has said to you, hey, we need to talk after class, or you need to come to my office? Or have you ever gotten a text from one of your parents that's like, we need to discuss something? How do you react? Like if you've messed up recently, you're probably thinking, oh shoot, I have to talk about this. I got caught. This is not good. If you're innocent, you might be like, oh, I got nothing to worry about, right? Everything should be fine. Like, how do you react? Or how about if you are accused of doing something and punished even though you didn't do anything wrong? How do you react in that situation? Well, what Peter is going to teach us here is he's going to show us a radical way of responding when we're treated unjustly, when we're punished or we have to suffer or go through a period of difficulty, even when we've done nothing wrong or even when we've done something good. And he's going to use two examples for us. First example is human institutions. So in his day, this is like government, a human institution that is an authority in your life. And the other example is a personal authority, so a person that you have to answer to in life. So let's look at just these first couple verses here in chapter 2, starting in verse 13. Peter teaches, be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. When he says, for the Lord's sake, be subject to human institution, this, like we said, he's referring to like the government of their day, which played a huge role in their lives, as it does for us today. But I think for you guys more so, you could think of this as like your school. School is the main institution created by humans that you're part of that has an authority in your life and pretty much runs your life, right? And what he says is the purpose of these human institutions is, he says it right here in verse 14, is to punish those who do evil and praise those who do good. This is really what school is meant to do, right? If you behave well and respect your teachers and do your assignments and work hard, you get rewarded, either with good grades or maybe a college education someday or whatever. And if you do the opposite, if you are disrespectful, if you don't do the work, if you skip class, all that kind of stuff, you are punished. You might get a detention or suspended or bad grades, or there might be long-term consequences. In theory, this is what a school is designed to do. And so then Peter goes on and teaches us, well then how should we act within this authority system in our lives? He says in verse 15, "This is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the emperor." He's saying the way that you conduct yourself at school with this kind of authority actually shows off your faith in God. It shows people who he is. Like the way that you respect and honor your teachers, that you live as a servant, the way that you treat these people as important and significant in your life. This is an exercise of your belief in God, whether you see it that way or not. Here's an example of this. When I was a youth leader in college, a 7th grader showed up to our group one time, and he was not a Christian. He had never heard that much about Jesus before. But after hearing the gospel and learning about Jesus, he wanted to become a Christian. He gave his life to Jesus, received the Holy Spirit, and became a Christian from that point forward. And I guess he was kind of a class clown and wasn't a great student and was kind of disrespectful to his teachers, probably why I got along with him well. I was pretty similar in middle school. And I heard from his teacher a few weeks later after he'd become a Christian, and she was like, "What happened to my student? He's totally different. He's like respectful, he does his assignments, he's quiet in class, he's not crazy anymore." That was an exercise of his faith. His faith in Jesus compelled him to act differently towards authority in this school. And so that's an example of what Peter is talking about here. Now he goes to the second example. This is the personal authority in your life. He says in verse 18, "Servants, be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust." Peter brings up what you've probably been thinking about, like, what about bad authority? What about that teacher or coach or even sometimes my parents or maybe even pastors? What about when they're wrong? What about when they're unfair? They treat us poorly. They look over us. They don't listen to us. How am I supposed to how am I supposed to respond then? And notice that Peter never says all authority is good or all authority is perfect or they always make the best decision. In fact, he even says specifically, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust. In that way, you're still to be subject with all respect. So when you're accused of doing something you didn't do, maybe cheating or talking in class, or when your parents don't treat you fairly, or when a coach overlooks you and isn't really responding that well to you in practice or whatever, Peter says, even in that, respect them, show them honor, listen to them, treat them as an authority. This actually shows off the character of God. Now, in his day, plenty of people dealt with this from the government. In fact, the Christians he's writing to, many of them were punished severely for their faith, even when they did good. Many of them would have been persecuted by the government, experienced imprisonment or physical pain and suffering. Some could lose their jobs or were ostracized from their communities. At the very least, they were treated as outsiders and people did not want to associate with them. And I know we don't get it to that degree in our day, but many of us will be unfairly treated or unjustly treated or accused of things we didn't do or stereotyped in poor ways because of our faith in Jesus and cast as an outsider in our community. And so if in Peter's day they could withstand that kind of suffering, then I think it's a message for us that we can too, that it's important for us to follow the same. Because even in that, he tells them in verse 19, "For this is a gracious thing. When you are mindful of God, you endure sorrows while suffering unjustly. For what credit is it if when you sin and you're beaten, you endure? But if when you do good and suffer for it, you endure, this is a gracious thing in the sight of God. For to this you have been called." Like he says, he invites us to endure unjust treatment because it shows off your godly character. Like even when you don't deserve it, this is a good thing for you to do. Now you should be thinking, and I'm sure you are at this point, like, why would I endure suffering and pain even when I don't deserve it? Why wouldn't I fight back? Why wouldn't I get revenge? Like if I just give in instead of getting even, doesn't that make me a pushover? isn't that wrong? And here's Peter's response in verse 21. This is really profound. For to this you've been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but he continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. He trusted himself to God. Jesus, he himself bore our sins in his body on the tree that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. By his wounds you've been healed, for you were straying like sheep, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseers of your souls. He's saying the gospel of Jesus gives you the power to endure the pain and suffering of unjust authorities. Look to Jesus. He never sinned. He never deserved what he got, but he was beaten, mocked, killed, hung on a cross. And why did he do that? He did it for you and for me. We were the sinners. We were the ones who treated him unjustly. We were the ones who deserved punishment. And yet he takes it. By his wounds, we are healed. He takes the end of our poor treatment of him, our rebellion to God. And it's because he did that that we can live to righteousness. And so Jesus becomes an example to us. That's what Peter is saying. In the same way that you've seen Jesus endure even worse suffering, even though he did nothing wrong, that Jesus can then give you the power to do the same. So here's what I want you to do. Many of you have mentioned that identifying as a Christian at school or in your community can make you kind of an outsider. And many of you will go through periods where you endure some sort of pain or suffering, some sort of unjust treatment, even when you are trying to do good. When you find yourselves in those situations, whatever it is for, look to Christ. Look to what he has done. And instead of seeking to get revenge or mistreat people, think, I want to show honor and respect. And you'll see people will begin to ask you questions like, how are you able to do that? What power do you have? What motivation do you have? Use that as an opportunity to say, Jesus endured so much more because of what I've done, and therefore I can do the same towards others. So we can talk more about what this looks like in our lives and our small groups now.